Ladies and gentlemen, my name's Paul, and in this RDNA.com video, we're going to be discussing RDNA 2 and a whole bunch of leaks that I've received for not just RDNA 2 actually, but for future AMD products. Now, I will get to RDNA 2 in a moment. I know for many of you, it is the thing that you probably most care about, so there will be a timestamp where you can fast forward, but I would suggest listening to the majority of this video because I think you're going to find a lot of stuff rather interesting. I have to say, I am very confident in a number of AMD's upcoming products, and if you've been watching my channel for a while, you'll know that I was the originator of the term Nvidia killer. And I can't obviously give details as to the leaker, but it was really funny because it was so late that I got a message from the person who told me this, and it was like really late. It was like 1 AM UK time, and they said, "Paul, I need to talk to you verbally right now." And so we spoke, and the conversation was pretty lengthy, and he was really excited from what he learnt internally from AMD. And the engineers at AMD were extremely optimistic about the second generation of RDNA, and they said that they believed that they were creating the Nvidia killer. And I have to admit, for a while, I was losing faith that maybe it was just internal bluster, engineers kind of laughing and, joking around, and maybe in reality, they didn't know the performance of Ampere. And perhaps they didn't know the performance of other GPUs too, as well as CPUs, of course. But I am more confident than ever that AMD will be competing very well in a wide range of markets. But this is not to say that Nvidia are screwed. But I want to really start things out with the CPU and data center side of things first. So I can confirm now that the desktop variants of Zen 3, which of course will be the Ryzen 4000, will be very impressive. I mentioned yesterday that one of my sources told me that they were internally joking that AMD's rival, Intel of course, would need to be popping pain pills. Those are the exact words they used, frequently because of the gaming performance that Zen 3 would bring. I will stress that that seemed to be in relation to Comet Lake, so how Rocket Lake and other future Intel architectures will fare is a completely different story, but I have also seen internal documentation, which I am not allowed to show, which does also confirm various aspects of the Ryzen 4000 series, and one of those things is of course the unified CCDs, which we've known about for some time. It's not surprising that it is of course for the desktop, but nevertheless I believe that Ryzen 4000 is going to be a pretty sizable bump in performance. That's the smallest thing that I wanted to get out of the way. Now let's move over to a couple of other things. I've also pretty much confirmed at this point that Arcturus will have a successor, MI200. MI100 is Arcturus, and this of course is the CDNA architecture. And from all I've gathered so far, this will be an MCM, multi-chip module design. This, again, is unsurprising given what we've learned so far. It seems to me like RDNA 3 2, RDNA 3 as well, will also be MCM, but I'm not so certain about that. I'm leaning towards it will be an MCM design based upon leaks and also what I'm hearing, but I'm not confirming RDNA 3 will be chiplet/MCM design. I think that AMD's roadmap for the GPU data center is apparently really good. And again, I have to be careful how I word this because I was asked to be very specific. But when it comes to Milan, which is the next generation of server CPUs from AMD, I've been told that it performs very well, performance per watt wise, against Intel's next generation CPUs, for example, Ice Lake. I do have some specifics, but I'm asked, unfortunately, not to mention them at the moment because it would be too easy to trace who leaked this information. But long story short, the performance per watt for the next generation AMD processors seems to be better than Intel, and I'm also hearing that the performance is better across several metrics. But as always, we'll wait for the official release of the SKUs, and then we can start testing things. Anyway, let's move over to RDNA 3, which I suspect most of you are more interested in anyway. So RX 6000, of course, is what we're going to be seeing these GPUs named. And AMD now have actually mentioned that, of course, that we won't have too long to wait until these GPUs are officially unveiled. And I'm sure that the timing of all of this is nothing to do at all with NVIDIA. And it's quite interesting because I suspect a lot of folks, well, you're wondering, should you buy Ampere? And I want to get this out of the way right now. If you prefer NVIDIA and are worried that Ampere is going to get stomped by RDNA 2, I wouldn't worry. But if you are someone who values just getting the best bang for your buck, it might be better to wait. So I'll explain further what I mean, but I do want to discuss a couple of specifics to begin with. So you remember that target of 50% performance per watt increase that AMD set for RDNA 2 over RDNA 1. Apparently it's better than that. Now I will stress, with all of this information, you should take it with a pinch of salt, because ultimately I cannot verify this information independently, but this is coming from a very good source, and they've been very accurate in the past. So I would take this as not confirmation, I would take this as it's a good theory. I personally am pretty confident in the information, but I don't want to say it's 100%, because as always with leaks, they can be wrong, but I do believe that this information has a high probability of being right. So I'm hearing that the performance per watt improvements for RDNA 2 are not 50%. So they're lower then, right? No. Doink, doink, doink. I'm actually hearing it's around 60% performance per watt. And I'm not going to give metrics here, but only a small fraction of that is because of the improved 7nm process. I actually know the specific numbers, but just to protect my source, I'm not going to give those numbers. It's a far smaller number than the 60%. So most of this comes down to the efficiency of the architecture itself. If you recall, quite a while ago, I was mentioning that, and this was an exclusive, it had been public knowledge that AMD were diverting Ryzen engineers to their GPU division, Radeon Technologies Group. Well, I basically leaked that RDNA 2 was the first beneficiary of this. And essentially, what they were doing is going in and optimizing things at a silicon level. This is not like you click a button and it's auto overclock kind of thing. This is hard, laborious work that you can be fighting tooth and nail to get just a small bump in performance per watt oftentimes. Sometimes it's easier, but sometimes it's not. And that team has really made a huge difference in the engineering of this. And this is not to say that the engineers previously were not, talented. It's just that it wasn't their speciality. Obviously, different engineers specialize in different things, blah, blah, blah. And I can tell you that in this case, it's really paid dividends. Okay, and now let's move over to some other specifics. I am, at this point, confident that there is no HBM2 for the RX 6000 series. To my understanding, it had been considered. It had been considered, but as of as the time I'm recording this video, internally, the people I know do not believe that there's any variant of a gaming GPU which will benefit from HBM2. It is purely traditional memory. And it is also, to my understanding, not 512-bit. A couple of people had told me it was 512, but then recently I've learned that it's very unlikely to be. Jim over at Adore TV has also told me it's, from what he understands, not 512, and then someone else told me it's not 512. So I'm pretty confident it's not 512. I think it's a lower bus width. I'll get into the specifics of that in a moment, and I'm hearing that the highest end SKUs have 16 gigabytes of memory. This isn't to say there couldn't be other SKUs in the future which have higher capacity, but to my understanding it is just, well, yeah, it's just GDDR6. No, I did not misspeak there, it's GDDR6. And I know what you're thinking. How the hell is it going to have enough memory bandwidth? And this is kind of the thing. There's a little bit of a secret with RDNA 2. And you remember how AMD called it a breakthrough gaming architecture? Well, I have to admit, I was very skeptical of what I'm about to tell you guys. But my source is very adamant, and I have run it by a couple of other people too, including Rogame in DM, and he said he's heard similar, but he didn't believe this originally. But my source is adamant, and this source, I won't say what they have revealed in the past, but their information previously has been 100% on AMD information. 100%. So, again, take it with a pinch of salt, but I'm pretty confident in this. They've told me that there is an infinity cache on the GPU, which is, can't believe I'm about to say this number, 128 megabytes. Yes, 128 megabytes. And they've told me that they believe, that is internally, that at AMD, that this is as well what they're telling their partners, that this amount of cache helps make up for the lack of memory bandwidth that, of course, you would get with something like, you know, 19 Gbps, GDDR6X memory. And there's also a very fascinating series of tests from a Twitter user, Vigor. I actually messaged him and asked if I could use these numbers just out of, you know, well, just because it's polite to do. And you'll notice that here he was testing an RX 5000 series GPU as an XT, 5700 XT. And yes, of course, memory bandwidth did help the 5700 XT perform better. But you will notice that despite the memory clock frequency being absolutely, you know, in the toilet, it still doesn't make as big of a difference as possibly you would imagine. This likely means that if this rumour is true, and again, I'm not saying it is, but if this information is true, the RDNA 2 architecture would probably be fine with such a large cache. And this is also leading to the next point. I'm hearing that the clock frequencies for the second generation of RDNA is much higher. I don't have specifics, unfortunately, that I can share, but you can think of it as kind of console-like. That's the best I can say. I have mentioned before that RDNA 2 doesn't go much past the PS5 clock frequency, and this is because of issues with the CUs themselves. Basically, the intra-CU buses, I got there in the end, the intra-CU buses, the logic starts to break down. Cerny, Mark Cerny, on the Road to PS5 event hinted this. He said that they start getting logic errors. This is not a fault of the PlayStation 5, it's kind of a limit of the RDNA 2 architecture, and I believe that this is still present on the desktop implementation too. So I believe that you're probably going to hit like 2200, maybe 2250 at best before these errors start to come in. Clearly there are things like silicon lottery as well, but I'm just saying in general, don't expect, like 3 gigahertz or something insane. We're not referring to those speeds, but we are referring to console-like speeds, which is still very impressive. Also, and this is not a leak because it's so well known at this point, 80 compute units for the highest end SKU seems to be confirmed. That seems to be the 6900 series. So this also brings me now to some specifics for each of the GPUs. There are 3 of them. There's the 67, 68, 69, nice, 100. And then there possibly will be XT variants and non-XT variants of those as well. There are still some things that I can't reveal, and there are still some things I don't know. So what I can reveal, I will mention now. AMD basically guessed how fast Ampere would be, and so they were not caught with their pants down. The 6700 series of cards is roughly going to be on par with the 3070. AMD apparently are considering undercutting Nvidia's pricing, but they're not sure about that because, as always, pricing is set almost last minute. There were some debates of it being quite a bit cheaper than Nvidia, and no, I don't mean $200, but, a decent chunk cheaper. Again, I don't want to give specific numbers because I don't want my source to be easily tracked down, but I did want it to be cheaper than Nvidia, but now they are considering not having it cheaper around the same price. They're not sure. And from my understanding, they don't know if they're going to be faster or slower in most games. But this information is a few days old, so obviously now that we're starting to see Ampere benchmarks pop out, they'll probably have a better understanding pretty soon. But as of when I heard the information, they were not certain 100% how they would fare against Nvidia, and it seems to be that certain games, Nvidia will have the advantage. In other games, it seems that AMD may do better. There is also the 6800 and the 6900. The 6800, as the name would imply, would be aiming to compete against the 3080. And there is also the 6800 XT. This card will compete against the 3080 Ti. We all know that that GPU at this point is incoming. And then finally, there's the 6900, which will probably be a little faster. It doesn't seem that they're going to beat 3090. It seems that it's going to be a little faster than the 3080 Ti, possibly nipping at the heels of the 3090. Again, these performance targets I cannot confirm as much as some of this other information, but at this point, I think it makes sense. The other questions I have are things like hardware-based ray tracing and DLSS, or more to the point, upsampling. From other sources, the best I can say is that it seems to be that it's handled almost exactly like the consoles. So it's obviously hybrid ray tracing, and obviously for upsampling, it seems to be lower precision operations. Unfortunately, I can't get specifics on this yet. I've been told things, but some stuff contradicts. So, for example, one person assures me that the hardware-based ray tracing performance is better than Turing. Then another person has told me, yeah, that's not quite true. It's actually inferior to Turing. I also have a lot of other questions as well, like, for example, decompression technology, which, of course, Nvidia have on Ampere. And it can also, of course, run on Turing. is that present on AMD's GPUs. Now, because this is not proprietary in that you can run it on shaders essentially, AMD can probably do that, maybe as a lower precision operation, I don't know. But again, I cannot confirm this information. If I were AMD, given what I know about the PlayStation and the Xbox, it makes sense. I honestly don't know. I don't want to sell you guys a lie. I think it's true. Okay, I haven't been told it exists, but I think it makes sense for it to exist. That's the best way I can phrase that. So my personal opinion is that Mama will provide with RDNA 2, and I think this is going to be a situation where NVIDIA, this is based upon what I know now, so I could be wrong. So this is based upon information that I've learned from my sources, and I still am lacking some details. But I personally believe that AMD will be a little cheaper. I think AMD will have slightly fewer features, and I think performance-wise, NVIDIA will edge out in certain SKUs and certain applications. But AMD will be very competitive. This is not going to be a situation of Vega 64. I think AMD have learned a lot of lessons. To me, it's also going to come down to a lot of other stuff. NVIDIA's ecosystem is very strong, and that's putting it mildly. As you are likely aware, things like NVIDIA Studio have picked up a lot of steam recently. NVIDIA have like a really good lineup of software, and that's not even including some of the other specific tasks which NVIDIA cards do really well in. So I'm not saying that NVIDIA cards are bad. I'm ultra excited about both lines of cards. Like, really excited about both lines of cards. I've always had a soft spot for graphics. And I'm actually more excited about the GPUs this time than the CPUs. Not that Ryzen or Rocket Lake or whatever don't interest me. But, you know what? Like, let's just say nothing happened in CPUs for the next, year or whatever, and we're stuck on a 3950X as the highest end SKU from AMD, and a 10900K from Intel. Okay, I'm happy with that. It's more than enough CPU grunt for games, honestly. Yes, if we shift to Zen 3, we're going to get higher frame rates by a little, but again, It's the GPUs at this point which I feel are going to bring the biggest improvement. Hardware-based ray tracing is an incredibly exciting technology to me. I think it's going to be amazing that AMD can do this. I think that upsampling technology is incredibly important. I think that changes to the rendering pipeline with mesh shaders, again, is going to be very, very, very critical because it fixes a lot of the limitations of current GPUs. We've got other technology as well that's coming in, but let's just face it, more GPU grunt with high refresh rate screens, all of this stuff is good. And you know what's really happy about this? The thing that makes me super duper happy? Cards like the RTX 3080 are going to cost, well, comparatively little. And again, I'm not saying that $500 for the 3070 is cheap. I appreciate that that is still a lot of money to many people. But it also means that cards like the 3060 and other cards which are lower SKUs have a ton of grunt too. Like, oh, okay, well I can pick up a 3060 and it's like, I don't know, as fast as a 1080 Ti and it costs like $300. Okay. It has a ton of potential for me. And imagine, and again, this, I don't know so much about, the lower end SKUs for AMD, but just imagine a card like the 6600, for example, and you can probably do like some calculations yourselves of the rough performance here. Imagine a card like the 6600, which is like $250 or something like that. And that card has a ton of grunt. It can absolutely destroy 1440p. and it costs like, again, $300-ish, $250, $300. Cards like that, to me, are going to push PC gaming forward, and I think it's going to be a fabulous, fantastic, tremendous time for PC gaming. Yeah. Anyway, I think that's just about it for this video. Hopefully you've enjoyed it. If you have, you know what to do. Subscribe and all that jazz. I'd also like to spend just a moment to thank everyone who has been a recent subscriber. And I also want to address a couple of other things. I will be putting out a video very soon for the Xbox Series S analysis. I've got a whole script that's almost ready to go. There will be very soon a retrospective of the R9 290X. Why the 290X? Honestly, the card was just there and I thought, I really want to see how this performs, and spoiler alert, it's actually kind of good. Well, good for such an old card. As for the RTX 30 series, there will be coverage on the channel. I've heard from Nvidia UK, I possibly will be getting a sample around launch. The chap over there is trying his best. They're waiting for another shipment, and a couple of AIBs are also telling me I'll be getting samples. If worst comes to the worst, I will also be buying a sample for testing, thanks to all of your help as well, because there's going to be a ton of coverage for this. I want to do a lot of cool projects, which is not just like review, because yeah. And I will also be extensively covering the RX 6000 series as well. I'll be working with some AIBs on that, hopefully, and also maybe purchasing a card. So, you know, subscribe to the channel. There'll be a ton of cool content over the next several months, and there'll also be some pretty big changes as well in the way coverage is handled. I don't want to say too much on that because this isn't the video for it, but I just want to say thanks to everyone who has been a recent subscriber or has stuck with us for years, and take care of yourselves. Have an amazing day. Bye for now.